I have a new way to get film-like colors inside Lightroom, and you don't even have to spend $5,000 on that new Fuji camera. Let's go for it. Lightroom presets that emulate film have been around for quite a while now, and some of them actually look great on some photos. The thing is that most of them take over all the sliders that you have at your disposal in order to adjust your photos. So while you might get a film-like look if you took the perfect photo in camera, you don't really get to play around anymore inside Lightroom, and you don't get to tweak your photos the way you like because all the sliders have already been used to get the film look. But what if I told you that you don't need all the sliders in Lightroom to emulate film? Let me explain. You see these things right here? They are called color response curves. You usually found them on the datasheet of certain film stock, or even on the cardboard box whenever you are buying one of these little things. They are meant to be a graphical representation of how each of the red, green and blue layers on the film react to light. For example, the one that I just showed you is from CineStill 800D. And we all know how blue that film is because it's balanced for tungsten light. So let's look at the curve again. You see, the blue line is up top, followed closely by the green one. That's what gives CineStill its specific bluish greenish kind of tones, but in the lower area of the graph, the thing reverses. So the darker tones are going to get a bit into the reds, and highlights are more into blues. That's basically the CineStill look in a graph. Now, while this is a cool history lesson, you'll probably have one of these two questions. Why do I need to know this? Or where do I get these curves? Let's start with the why. The answer here is really simple. All you have to do is copy these three curves inside Lightroom's curves panel and you get yourself a pretty good film emulation. Now couple that with a neutral color profile and you're pretty much set to go in order to start editing with film-like colors, but with all the sliders available to you. And to take this one step further, you could bake it into a Lightroom camera profile with the help of Photoshop, but we'll talk about why would you want to do that at a later point in the video. And to help me do this, I'm using a software called PureRef in order to overlay the curves on top of my Lightroom panel, and that way I can easily copy the entire curve. It's going to take you roughly around 10 minutes for every single profile. It's a bit annoying, but the results are worth it. The next obvious question is where do you get a color response curve? And that's pretty easy as well. All you need is one of these and DaVinci Resolve. You see, if you take a linear gradient that goes from black to white and put it inside DaVinci Resolve, apply any film LUT that you like and then look at the waveform, you're pretty much getting the curves on the spot. This works because the same way the film had red, green and blue layers, our pixels have red, green and blue subpixels, and a gradient that goes from black to white has all the values starting from 0 and going to 255. This means the LUT that we apply on top of the gradient will have to affect every single pixel going from 0 to 255 in all the color channels, and that way we get a perfect graph for the entire film emulation. Pretty neat, isn't it? Now, assuming you managed to follow along with all these steps, and even if you didn't, don't you worry, I got you covered as well, you'll probably want to save this as presets. But Lightroom does not allow you to save individual curves, so you'll have to save the entire curves panel. Now, that means you're going to reset the luminosity curve whenever you're going to apply the presets you've worked so hard for. And to fix that, you're going to right-click the preset, select Show in Explorer, open the file with your text editor of choice, and then search and delete all this text that you see on screen right now. A much better option would be to save them as camera profiles. To do that, you'll need to go in Photoshop, but there are resources on the web that you can follow. I also imagine there are some of you who would like to get the color profiles, but don't want to have to deal with all these things. For you, I have a pack of film color profiles on my preset store that you can grab, and you'll also be supporting my work and helping me make more videos like this one. And as you will see in the next portion of the video, they work really well in combination with the all-in-one grain preset and the other film emulation stuff that I already have up there. And now that you know how to get the film emulation color, let me show you a practical demonstration so you can understand how I'm using these camera profiles in combination with grain and all the other good stuff to emulate film. Let me start by explaining the way I think whenever I'm editing my photos. Those of you who also do video might be familiar with the node-based system inside of DaVinci Resolve. It looks something like this. Each node is basically a container for settings or effects, and the program will go through it one by one and apply them, and this is what will give you the final color grade. The greatest advantage when working with a node-based system is that they don't depend on each other in order to function properly. So you can always go back and edit, let's say, node number 2, and its effect will trickle down to the entire chain, but as long as you have the entire chain active, you're going to see all the effects, so you're going to tune things for your final look. Now let's imagine a workflow like that, but designed for photography. And no, I'm not the person who's going to encourage you to take your photos to DaVinci Resolve. That has been done, but it's such a cumbersome workflow that I would never encourage you to go try it out. I'm going to stick with Lightroom, and my imaginary nodes are going to be basic correction, exposure correction, masking, color grading, and effects. Now let's see what that means on an actual photo. This one I took on a Nikon D750 with a 135mm lens that I modded with a custom aperture, and if you like the shape of the bokeh, you can check my video on custom anamorphic aperture, the link is probably somewhere up there. Now, just by the look of this photo and considering the natural tones in it, I'm going to go for Kodak Portra 800 Emulation, and I know that film has a lot of grain, so of all things, I'm starting up with the effects. I'm going to apply my all-in-one grain preset, and I'm going for quite a strong grain because Portra 800 does have a lot of grain. Next up, I'm also going to apply the Kodak Portra 800 Emulation, and you already can see that I've got a more natural looking photo than the normal color profile that Lightroom has applied to my photo. I'm also going to apply some sharpness in order to get a more accurate representation of the final look of the photo before I even start editing. Also, I'm going to increase the luminance because I have big grain particles and I don't want anything in a photo to be smaller than a grain. This might feel a bit awkward for some of you, but keep in mind, it doesn't matter in which order we're doing these things, so why not apply the things that we already know we want in our final shots before even starting to do the basic adjustment. That way we'll already have a visual indicator for these things whenever we're doing the basic adjustments. And now that all that is set, I'm going to do the basic adjustments. I'm going to lower the contrast, decrease the highlights because I want more details in my highlights, increase the details in the shadows, and also lower my black. I'm using these basic adjustments to get as many details out of the raw files as possible, and I'm going to use the tone curve later on in order to get the contrast that I want in my shot. But before that, I'm going to turn my attention towards white balance, and while I do know that that film stock is balanced to daylight, I want to see the cloudy first because I shot in the shadow. It's not a bad start, but let's see the daylight as well, and I think I prefer it even though it's a bit on the colder side. I'm also going to reduce the clarity a bit, just to make it a bit bloomier, and I'm also going to increase the saturation, but not very much because I don't want all the greenery to turn into radioactive stuff. And to finalize the basic look of the photo, I'm going to use the tone curve to add back the contrast that I took out when I wanted to get more details in the entire photo. And with that, the general look of the photo is mostly done. I'm gonna play around a bit with the calibration panel for more natural looking colors and because I want a bit more vibrancy in the entire photo, but that's pretty much the entire gist of it. And top it all off, I'm going to add a few more masks in order to fine-tune the exposure to my liking. This is a simple trick that I like to use all the time. The first mask is adding exposure in the front of the subject, while the second one is using the exterior of the radial gradient in order to decrease the exposure so the eye of the viewer is directed towards the face in the portrait. And the best thing about using camera profiles instead of presets is that now I can come in here and check if other film stocks would actually look better instead of Portra 800. And to be honest, I really love Kodak 2383, but that's down to personal preference. Now before I end this video, I have to come clean about one thing. I've been using this method for more than 6 months now, and I've kind of kept it a secret under the pretext of testing the method. But the reality is, it works like a charm. And all of the photos that you see on screen right now are using one of my custom camera profiles. The fact that you can bake the look into a camera profile and basically have a film stock that your camera now sees in, and you're able to use all the editing tools inside Lightroom to edit your photos afterwards, it's quite amazing. Keep in mind, this is not a preset and this is not a one-click solution, but is the perfect building block if you want to develop your own look that is based on one of history's many great film stocks. Now, if you like the video, drop a like, a subscribe, and maybe share it with a photographer friend. But in any case, see you in the next one.